Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty frustrating.
Yep.
Terraform plan and apply hangs.
Yeah, when everything just stops.
Exactly. We've gathered some insights, basically a roadmap, so you don't feel completely stuck when your infrastructure code just, well, freezes. Our mission today, to give you a systematic way to figure out why it's hanging and, get things moving again.
Precisely. It feels like silence, but there's always a reason. A structured approach is key.
Okay, let's dive in. A really common one seems to be when Terraform is just waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting on the cloud provider. What's happening under the hood there?
Right. So often it really boils down to the provider's API. Terraform sends out a request maybe to create a virtual machine or something, and it's waiting for the OK back.
And it just doesn't come.
Well, not always quickly enough. Could be network issues, maybe the provider itself is having a moment, or you might even be hitting API rate limits. Sometimes even a small network blip can cause a really long delay.
Okay, so if we suspect that's the issue, what's the first thing we do? I see tflog trace mentioned here.
Yeah, tflog trace is super useful. Think of it like turning on a super detailed transcript of the conversation between Terraform and the provider API. It logs everything, the raw requests, the responses. It can be a lot of text to sift through for sure.
Right.
But buried in there, you'll often find the exact point it's stalling, or maybe an error message that didn't surface otherwise.
And checking the provider status page, just to rule out a major outage.
Absolutely. That's always a quick, easy sanity check. Before you dive deep into logs, just make sure the service isn't down for everyone.
Makes sense. And we can be proactive here too, right? Something about setting timeouts in the config.
Exactly. You can configure timeouts for specific resource operations within your Terraform code. Most providers support this.
So Terraform won't wait forever.
Right. It's a balance, though. You don't want timeouts so short that perfectly normal, just slightly slow operations fail. But setting reasonable limits prevents those indefinite hangs caused by temporary glitches.
Okay, another common one, state locks. This sounds like putting your infrastructure in timeout.
Yeah, sort of. It's actually a safety feature. Terraform locks the state file when it starts an operation.
Why?
To prevent, say, two people from running Terraform apply at the exact same time and messing up the infrastructure or corrupting the state, only one operation can hold the lock.
Okay, that makes sense. But sometimes it gets stuck locked.
Yeah, that's the problem. Normally, Terraform releases the lock when it's done, or if it errors cleanly. But if the process crashes or gets interrupted unexpectedly, maybe due to network issues with the backend itself.
The lock doesn't get released.
Exactly. And then nobody else can run, plan, or apply.
So how do we check if there's a stray lock hanging around?
It depends on your backend. If you're using, say, S3 with DynamoDB for locking, you'd check the DynamoDB table. The Terraform documentation for your specific backend will tell you how to inspect the lock status.
Right. And the crucial thing is to check if there's actually still a Terraform process running that holds that lock legitimately.
Absolutely critical. Which brings us to force unlocking.
The big red button. When do we press it?
Only, and I mean only, as a very last resort. You need to be 100% certain that no Terraform process is actively modifying resources.
Because if you unlock it while it is running,
you risk corrupting your state file, leaving your infrastructure in an inconsistent state. It can cause massive headaches down the line, so extreme caution.
Got it. Handle with care. Okay, moving on. What about when Terraform just seems to take forever creating or updating a resource? The outline mentions dependencies.
Yeah, this happens a lot. Terraform builds a graph of your resources and understands their dependencies. Resource B needs resource A to exist first, for example. Sometimes these dependencies are obvious, explicitly defined. Other times they're implicit. But the hang occurs when a resource is waiting for something else external to Terraform to finish, or for another resource to reach a specific state.
Like waiting for a database to initialize.
Exactly. Or maybe waiting for a load balancer to report as healthy before attaching instances. Terraform appears hung, but it's actually just patiently waiting for that external condition.
So how do we diagnose that? What is it waiting for?
Again, logs are your friend. Check the Terraform logs for messages related to that specific resource. Often it'll say something like, still waiting for resource X to become available. Also, check the cloud provider's console or logs for that specific resource. Is it stuck in a creating or updating state there? Sometimes visualizing the dependency graph Terraform uses can also reveal unexpected waits.
Right. So zooming out a bit, beyond these specific scenarios, what are the general strategies? Log analysis seems paramount.
Absolutely. Detailed logs, especially trace level, are invaluable. Find the last successful action before the hang, but don't just look at Terraform logs.
Check the provider logs, too.
Yes, and logs from any dependent services. Are you seeing HTTP 429 errors in the cloud provider logs? That points to rate limiting. 5nextx errors, that's a server-side issue on their end.
And we can also look at the machine running Terraform, right? Not just the logs.
Good point. Use system tools top htop network monitors. Is the Terraform process consuming tons of CPU? Maybe it's struggling locally. Is network I/O maxed out but slow? That points back to slow API comms.
Okay, and finally, isolation testing. Using a target.
Yeah, that's a really effective technique. If you suspect one particular resource or module is the culprit, try running Terraform apply dacetargetResource.name.
Just focus on that one thing.
Exactly. If that hangs, you've narrowed it down significantly. If it works fine, the problem lies elsewhere in the plan, maybe in a dependency. You can also test basic things like provider credentials and network connectivity completely separately from Terraform.
So it really boils down to understanding those key interaction points. Terraform, talking to the provider, how it manages state with locks, and how it sequences resource creation based on dependencies.
That's pretty much it. Systematically checking those areas usually uncovers the root cause.
It moves you from feeling helpless to actually having a plan of attack.
Definitely. So next time you hit one of these hangs, think about which of these steps feels like the most likely starting point for your situation, and maybe think about how better monitoring could give you a heads up before things grind to a complete halt.